Okay, so I am on chapter 18, Fireworks, and this is from the Liberation of Gabriel King, and I'm on page 109. It was on account of Terrence that I came up with my idea about Mr. Evans. Me and Frieda were on our way back from town the next afternoon when Frieda brought him up. We were walking along an old dirt road through clouds of hot, dry dust, and I could barely see Frieda through the haze. But she was talking real steady, so it didn't matter. You think Mr. Evans is mean as he seems, she asked? Because I saw him in town the other day, and he was talking to Mr. Al, and he didn't seem so bad, but I don't know. Usually I let Frieda ramble on, but I was feeling pretty good about me and Terrence, so I started thinking, you're pretty scared of him. He's on your list, isn't he? I said. If I wasn't Frieda's best friend, she might have socked me in the jaw. A body didn't accuse Frieda Wilson of being scared without a dang good reason. You're scared of him too, Frieda pointed out. And besides, my daddy told me to be scared of him. I'm supposed to be. Thought you said this was serious business, I said. And that serious business meant we couldn't always listen to our pops. Frieda frowned, but I kept right on going. Maybe we should try to talk to him like I talked to Terrence. See how great that turned out? That's not the same thing, Frieda said, but she didn't look so sure. How come? Because Terrence is my brother, and Mr. Evans is, well, he's an adult, ain't he? How bad can he be? Frieda didn't say anything. I knew she was thinking about him calling her that name on moving up day. I thought of that too, a whole bunch of times, but I sure wish he could take it back. Maybe Mr. Evans wished the same thing. Maybe he's sorry for calling you that name, I said. He was probably just mad about you, mad about you and Duke fighting like you were mad at me for killing Gilligan. That's what you could talk to him about. You could tell him you're sorry and that you were just sticking up for me, and then you could ask if he'd talk to Duke so he wouldn't be so mean to me next year. I bet he'd do it too, because that's what Pops do. Suddenly, I felt like a real peace warrior. I was going to make peace between Frieda, Mr. Evans, me, and Duke, and all at once. And then we'd really cross everything off our list by the bicentennial. But this time it was Frieda who didn't look so sure. When you want to talk to him, she asked. I can't just knock on the trailer door or else Duke and Mrs. Evans will be there. This was a good point, but my plan was growing bigger in my mind. You can talk to him at the fireworks. He'll be there for certain. It'll be perfect time because there'll be all sorts of people around, so if he'd be mean, he can't do anything. But if he's not, you'll find out and you can cross him off your list. It'll be completely brave, just like you said. I guess it's an okay plan, Frieda said. It's the best plan ever, I told her. Just wait and see. When you're waiting for something special, time slows down to a crawl. I could hardly wait for the fireworks. Frieda's daddy was holding a special prayer service that night to pray for our country, so he agreed to let Frieda stay over at my house. Pop set up the tent and laid out our sleeping bags. Frieda came over extra early for dinner. We sat in the living room to watch TV, and Pop didn't even get riled up because the news was all about the celebrations going on around the country. They showed the tall ships lining up in New York Harbor and a place called George in the state of Washington, where they'd made a 6-foot cherry pie. I was, probably because of George Washington, I was hard-pressed to say where I'd have rather been, so he doesn't know if he'd rather be seeing the boats or the cherry pie. And that's probably because George Washington said he didn't chop down the cherry tree. Or all the cherry trees, I think. When dinner was ready, Mama called us to eat. Usually, Frieda was the first to the table because Mama made stuff Frieda never got at her house, like macaroni and cheese from a box, hot dogs boiled on the stove. Tonight, we were having spaghetti and salad and Wonder Bread. Mama even made blueberry pie for dessert, so we'd have something red, something white, and something blue. But Frieda didn't hardly seem to notice. I wonder if she was thinking about Mr. Evans. I was real excited for her to cross him off her list. But when I asked if she was ready, Frieda just shrugged. Then Mama had to ask her 3 times to pass the spaghetti. She was so un-Frieda Wilson-like, it made me downright uncomfortable. By the time we walked into town, I was getting nervous, feeling in my gut. Things were pressing in again. When we arrived, the front lawn of the town hall was full. There was a podium set up in the front, all decorated with paper bag lanterns and American flags, and the mayor made a speech about the special history of our country and the history of Hallowell. He kept adding about progress and how much we'd made and how we'd made so much of it. I didn't pay attention. I was watching the people selling peanuts and flags. What an American flag, Pop asked me and Frieda. Mama gave him a look that said, we ain't got the money for that, but Pop leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. This occasion only comes once every 200 years, he said. And they bought 2 little frags with 1776 to 1976 stitched on them, one for me and one for Frieda. He also bought us each a bag of boiled peanuts. Go have some fun, he said, swatting me on the behind. But come back for the fireworks. Mama and I will be right here. Me and Frieda took off. We wove in and out around the crowd and ate our peanuts over by the Revolutionary War reenactment. Only Frieda gave most of her peanuts to me. Don't you like them, I asked. They're okay, she said, but she didn't sound like it. We watched the guys dress up in old uniforms pretending to be redcoats and farmers. Then, when that was over, we listened to somebody else making a speech, but that got real boring. Think we should find Mr. Evans, I asked. We were sitting on the grass near the podium. In a bit, Frieda said. She was pretending to be real interested in the speech. How about now, I asked a while later. Shh, Frieda said. Aren't you listening? I picked at some grass. It's getting darker, I said. They're going to start the fireworks soon. And then how will we find him? Frieda sighed. I know where he is, she said, and pointed to some men near the podium. Sure enough, there was Mr. Evans, Mr. Bustleby, and Mr. Carmen standing in the clump, just like 6th graders. Me and Frieda watched them for a while. Frieda stood up, narrowed her eyes, and jutted out her chin. Gabe, she said, at last, I'm going. Then it was like on the rope ring. One minute, Frieda was standing next to me in the twilight. The next minute, she was walking toward Mr. Evans. I don't know whether I ought to stay put or go with her, but suddenly I wondered if I hadn't thought things through. Maybe if it was the way Mr. Evans and Mr. Carmen looked like Duke and Frankie, or maybe if it was the way that Frieda had been acting all night, but I started to wonder if it was such a good idea after all, except now it was too late. I got up and walked closer, but I stopped a little while away from Frieda. Pushed her way in. She slid right next to Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, I heard her say in a voice that sounded real little. At first, no one noticed Frieda. She stood there a little while. Then she looked at me and shrugged. She had a real funny look on her face. But I got a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, real sour, like before you get a stomach ache, so he's having a foreboding feeling. I motioned for her to come back. Forget it, I said, but the words didn't come out. I thought of my dream and Mr. Evans' spider waiting to pounce. Mr. Evans, Frieda said again, and this time he looked down. It was strange the way everything happened right then. Mr. Evans looked at Frieda, and then he said something to Mr. Carmen. Frieda looked confused. My stomach was tightening, and I wondered if I ought to run and get popped, but I couldn't leave Frieda. Then Mr. Evans smiled and leaned in like he was whispering something special to her. That's when Frieda's eyes went big as full moons, and she took 2 steps backward real quick. She tripped over Mr. Evans' foot, even though Frieda never hardly trips. He laughed like it was funny, and all the other men laughed too. Then she was scrambling up and running toward me so fast, you would have thought there was a ghost on her heels. What happened? I said when she got close, but Frieda didn't stop. She kept right on going. That's when the fireworks started. A few at first, then more and more. They were loud, cracking and popping over our heads, but Frieda didn't look up. She went straight to my Pop and stood next to him. I mouthed the words, what did he say, 100 times, but Frieda just shook her head. She took Pop's hand and squeezed it hard. Pop looked down at her, surprised, but I saw him squeeze back. Pretty amazing, he said, squatting down so he was nearer to us. What do you think? I hadn't even looked up yet. Look at that one, Mama said, pointing up. She laughed and pulled me close. So they're having this really magical moment, and he can't concentrate on it. Isn't it great to live in America? She said, kissing the top of my head. Just imagine, someday you'll tell your children you were alive for the bicentennial. I looked over at Frieda. Yep, I said, sure is great. But really, I was thinking how no one better have said anything mean to my best friend. Mama held me tight, and Pop grinned at the sky, and right then the biggest starburst of red, white, and blue exploded over our heads. The crowd said ooh and ah like it was magical, but Frieda didn't make a sound.